Hey guys, what's going on? Scott here, and welcome to the very first DBD Idea reviews. I was really surprised at the amount of suggestions I got, and a lot of stuff was really cool. And I was originally just going to pick an idea and then talk about it, but seeing as how there were so many ideas, I think it would be better if I kind of separated it into a couple of categories. So I think every episode I'm going to go over like 4 or 5 ideas. And the reason is because a lot of these ideas are just simple suggestions. Hey, make this perk do this instead. Hey, make this map like this. And it's not something I can discuss, for minutes because it's just a simple, yeah, let's do that. That's a really good suggestion. I like that. And then at the end, we'll tackle some of the more complicated suggestions like new killers, new game mechanics, things like that. Because those you can talk about for a decent amount of time. That being said, let's start with one of the quicker ones. And the first one here is I don't know why I'm looking here. Like in real life, there's nothing here, but that's where it's gonna go. Brutal Strength. This was suggested by Caleb BBQ, and it's a brutal strength buff. Add an ability to cancel the breaking animation for pallets and walls. And I think that is an amazing idea. I've had this idea for a long time. I've talked about this on stream a couple times as well. And I think some perk or mechanic allowing you to do that is a great idea. And honestly, I think buffing Brutal Strength would not be a bad idea. Brutal Strength is one of those perks where it's like, if you have it on, you're like, oh, that's nice. But you very rarely actually feel the effects of it in a match. It only saves you, like a half a second. And having a perk slot dedicated to that, while sometimes it might actually get you down because you catch up just that little bit faster, most of the time it's just something that feels nice, and that's about it. Now, if you had this mechanic, it adds a whole layer of mind games and stuff like that. So there's the thing where you can fake pallets. You can fake pallet breaks. I'm sorry. You can fake pallet breaks. Like, you can like walk up to the pallet, you look down, and you just stand still for a second. And it works against inexperienced players sometimes. Good players are going to watch for the snap in your animation because you can't fake that. And that is cool, but it doesn't really work against good players. And I think with something like this, where when you kick a pallet, it's just that's it. You press space and the pallet breaks. With this kind of suggestion, it would be when you kick a generator, you hold the button and it fills up the bar, and when you fill the bar, then you kick the generator. It would be kind of like that, where you could cancel it at any time and then just go. This would make it so if a survivor decides to leave a loop, you can kind of you don't know what they're going to do. Like, you can start kicking it and see how they react, and the survivor can see how you react. The survivor can take the gamble once they've seen you have brutal strength to go, okay, I'm going to wait until he actually fully kicks this to start running, meaning the survivor will be still safe in the loop if he fakes it, but he will make less distance if he goes through with it and actually breaks it. So it's like a little mind game on every pallet, and that's kind of cool because it's kind of fair to both sides. The survivor can predict that the killer is going to bluff it, or the killer can do the same, and it would result in a cool little mind game in every pallet. Now, there are a lot of loops where that wouldn't be able to work, but it's mostly for like the shorter loops where sometimes the better option is just immediately leaving the loop once you've dropped it. So I think that'd be cool. I've suggested that for a while, and I'm glad to see other people have that idea as well. Next, let's go over this one. This is a bit of a meme suggestion, but I wanted to go into it a bit more. It just says delete Haddonfield. And I and a lot of other people always talk about why Haddonfield is like a map you would want to disconnect on as killer, because it's so unpleasant to play on. But I never really go into why that is the case. I never actually break it down why Haddonfield is so bad. So there are 2 main huge issues with Haddonfield. One is the random generation of windows in the buildings can make some loops, even without balanced landing, just ridiculous. If you get certain windows can be open where the killer has no choice but to vault through them, or go an extremely long way around to the point where the survivor can drop out the window, run around, and do it again 3 times. And that is just incredibly unfun, and it's based on luck too, which windows are open. So the RNG aspect of that is awful. Another main problem with Haddonfield is the fences. Despite saying that they fixed it, they didn't. I don't know why they said they fixed it. It's every single time you play Haddonfield, you still have these fences where the fences are basically the width of an entire house. And it would take a killer to get, if here's the fence, and there's a survivor here, and the killer is here, it would take the killer 2 minutes to catch up with the survivor if they keep doing this and rotating around each other. And that is just the worst feeling in the world, having a survivor an inch away from you, but you can't do anything about it. And that is all over Haddonfield. That's a part of the reason why I do not like the new Silent Hill map, because they have that same issue. They have that giant long wall with no entrances, and if there's a survivor on the other side, too bad. You just can't catch them. And that's a really, really frustrating feeling. It's not even that it's harder to win on Haddonfield, it's just frustrating as hell to play on. Another big thing is, Haddonfield is... It's hard to keep track of what is going on in that map as a killer. So if you're on, like, you know, a Macmillan map, you have a general idea usually, at least if you're experienced, you have a general idea of where the survivors are. You know, whether it's because you could see scratches in the distance of them running to a generator, you can see crows flying up in the distance because they're moving near a generator or something. For me, on those maps, it's a lot easier to tell roughly where people are. On Haddonfield, almost every generator except the ones in the street are in a house, underground in a house, in like a basement, behind houses. They're all things that you have no visual indicators of people like being near them at all. You wouldn't see scratch marks, you wouldn't see crows flying up because they're all behind things. They're all out of line of sight. So a lot of the time when I play Haddonfield, I'm kind of just aimlessly wandering until I hear a generator being worked on. Whereas on the other maps, I usually have a pretty good idea or a plan. Because if you have like a keen eye in the distance, you might see across the map a crow flies up, and that's really useful information. With Haddonfield, you just don't have any of that, so you're just a blind person running around, running in the walls and shit. It's just a bad map. It's just frustrating. They have not fixed it in years. It has been really annoying to play on. And even as survivors, sometimes it can be annoying too. Pretty much the only safe building is the House of Pain. That's the building with the basement and the that very safe pallet dividing it. And sometimes survivors get screwed over by bad luck too. Sometimes they get windows that are really bad. Sometimes the window is not a window, it's a doorway that the killer can just walk through and hit you. The pallets on the street are extremely unsafe. I just find it a really bad map for everybody. So I would not care if they deleted Haddonfield. In fact, I think that would be a super swell thing, but they're obviously not going to do that because, you know, Myers was a licensed thing, and they're not just going to delete things that are related to licenses and stuff like that. Next suggestion. This one is, again, these initial ones are all very minor things that you can only talk about for a minute or two, but this one is just the ability to select what lobby background and lobby music you have for, you know, previous chapters, and this was suggested by Sam Shouts. And sure, why not? I think that's a cool idea. I think a lot of the killers have much cooler backgrounds and themes than the others. It's a very minor thing. The only thing it would add is slightly more file size for just, you know, just the backdrop area. I can't imagine it's very big. The game's already like, what, like 40 gigs? It's a huge game. So I think adding like a couple of extra megabytes of a scene for each loading or for each main menu it's whatever. It adds a bit of customization, and I think that's really cool. Maybe make it so you only get it once you like prestige 3 that killer or something like that. So there's a sense that you've unlocked something. Just something interesting like that. And I see no reason to not allow this customization, considering they've already done all the work. They just have to let you select what it is. And I think that'd be pretty cool, harmless, and sort of a why not thing. Okay, next, these last two are going to start going into more major discussions. And this is kind of how I want to structure these videos in the future. We'll do a couple of short ones and then, you know, one or two ones that require a bit more discussion. So, the first one, it seems like it could be a quick discussion, but it's going to branch into something else. And it's an idea, oh god, by Zvezda. I'm sure I said that wrong. And it's an idea for a perk called Projection. So basically what this perk would do is, after you've been in the Terradias for a certain amount of time, kind of like how Diversion charges, the ability is activatable, and it's activatable in the same way. You would have to not be sprinting, so Dead Hard wouldn't work. You have to not be at a pallet, so it wouldn't do any means necessary. And you'd have to not be crouching, so Diversion wouldn't work. It would have to be with you idle standing. And that's why he says while standing still. Press the active ability button, which would be E on PC, or whatever you have it set it to project a forward line of fake scratch marks 6 meters in length in the direction that you're looking. And again, this seems like a simple idea. Cool, let's add it. Move on. I want to discuss why I think things like this are very important. And that is the generic formula of Dead by Daylight works very well. But after many years, it's becoming a little stale. It is, you know, it's the same formula every single map. And not every map, but most maps. You're doing the same thing. You're looping using windows, those are your main defenses. Occasionally, you can hide depending on the map. And those are your main defenses as a survivor. That's what the game is, and the killer has to counter you using those things. I don't think there are enough perks like diversion and red herring, and projection that this suggestion is another example of a trend I kind of want to see the game go towards, where it's breaking just a little bit out of the monotony of doing the same thing every match. And with a perk like this, you now introduce a very slight mind game. And that's all it takes to drastically shift up the game. Imagine you have Iron Will, and you're like at a very unsafe rock loop, and so the survivor is on the other side of the rock as the killer. Killer can't see the survivor. You send scratches one way, and you crawl the other way. You have Iron Will, so he can't hear you. Killer sees scratches, and even if they realize it 2 or 3 seconds later, that's already giving you so much distance to go the other way, perhaps, to a better area. This could counter people. Killers sometimes are, they'll do something smart, and they'll basically rotate around a loop and kick a pallet to force you back into a dead zone. This would give survivors a little bit of a counterplay to that. They might be able to trip the killer up. And I think it's important to have more things like this that shift up the game a bit. Because, like I said, just doing the same thing over and over every game can get a bit dull. There are very few things you can do as a survivor to outsmart your opponent. There are things like waiting at pallets, then continuing to run to bait the respect, faking window vaults, things like that. There are things you can do, but I feel like there could always be more. And adding the ability to bait killers like this, it's already been done. Red herring and diversion are two things that don't work very often, but when they do, it's a really cool feeling. Like, it's very rare as a survivor you feel like you've tricked the killer. As long as the killer's a good player, you don't ever feel like you've tricked them. Like window teching is like an example of like you tricking them. They think you went one way, but really you crawled onto them. So I think more stuff like that is very healthy for the game, as long as it's not too oppressive. It's just a little kind of diversion thing to make the killer second guess himself a bit. I think things like that are really cool, and I think that is a route the game should take, whether it's through perks or base mechanics. That's something that I find really interesting, and I think they should, continue with suggestions like that. Finally, this is another kind of major discussion, and it's by Mr. Gorilla Guy, and basically what he's saying here is that the devs should intentionally heavily buff certain perks like every month. They should, make things like Beast of Prey have like a much greater effect for a month, and then see how that affects the meta. And then, have, very useful perks like Unbreakable, toned back in certain months and things like that. Basically, even if the changes are not necessarily good, they're just different. And this reminds me of why I like the game Path of Exile so much. For those of you who don't know, Path of Exile is a free-to-play ARPG, kind of like Diablo. And one of the things that they are very good at doing over at Grinding Gear Games, they're the developers, they're very good at shifting up the meta. They intentionally heavily buff abilities a lot, so much so that sometimes they become completely broken. If you remember Ark back in the day, if you ever played Path of Exile, they buffed it to hilariously overpowered levels. But the thing is, it's okay though, because then in a couple months they shift it back, and they keep it fresh. They keep it, they keep things different, so people don't end up running the exact same builds every single time. The meta builds for that game they change like almost every league, and that's awesome. That keeps it alive and fresh and new every time. In Dead by Daylight, there's no reason to not just run like Decisive Strike, Unbreakable, Borrowed Time, Adrenaline. That's just like, there's no reason to just not run that. As, for Killer, there's no reason to not run like Barbecue, Pop, Corrupt Intervention. They all have like those set perks that are just like the default, okay, you should be running these perks on almost every killer. And I don't think that's good. So with this suggestion, it's basically like taking the worst perks in the game and buffing the shit out of them, maybe even over buffing them, just to keep it interesting, just for a month, and just see what happens, see how the meta shifts. It's not going to break the game or anything like that. If something is so horrendously overpowered, they can just undo it. But I think the core, not necessarily the suggestion itself, but the core message that behavior needs to update things more frequently than just once every, month and a half, 3 months. I think that is a philosophy they should definitely take. And even if they do change things just, every month and a half, or like mid-chapter patch and then the actual chapter patch, the thing is, they don't really change enough, in my opinion. I think they should be changing 15 perks every month and a half. And it doesn't even have to be hard. You can just tweak values. It doesn't have to be a huge you know, you have to rewrite the code and things like that. Just tweak values. Make brutal strength 40% instead of, you know, what it is currently right now. Just do things like that. Shift up the meta. Keep the game interesting. This is what would keep people coming back more and more and more. They want to see, oh, hey, I can actually try a new build now and have it not be a joke. I can use Predator. I can use Beast of Prey. I can use Monster Shrine. Holy shit, these perks do something now. That's awesome. I don't have to use the same 4 perks every game now. Give more fun perks to survivors and, you know, tweak down the stronger ones and just keep shifting things over and over again so the game stays fresh every month. Like, hell, you can almost do it every week. There's the whole Path of Exile philosophy where you can do, like, you know, every major patch you do a bunch of balancing changes. You could even do it something like smaller, like the Shrine. Make it so the perks in the Shrine are like empowered for that week or something like that. So if you have Monster Shrine in there, maybe its effects are doubled, or maybe it lets you teleport to the basement. If you have Beast of Prey in there, I like just something like that. Anything that just shifts it and makes it more exciting and changes things more rapidly. I think that is more fun than just stagnating on the same shit over and over again, because DS Unbreakable Borrowed Time Adrenaline has been the survivor build since those perks came out. Years and years. Nothing's changed. That's objectively like the strongest build you can bring. And I think it would be nice if they shifted things up. And that goes for Killer as well. So yeah, that's why I think this suggestion is a precursor to like something that needs to be changed as a whole on a fundamental level about the game. I think that would be a lot better. And I think it would, yeah, it'd be really cool. But that is it for this first episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Really, really cool suggestions. There are so many. There's like 1,700 comments I had to read through. That I had to. I loved reading through them. There were a lot of cool killer suggestions. There's no way I'm going to be able to get to all of them. But the basic thing will be in the for the next video, I will take suggestions from the comments on the previous video. So again, comment down here, repost your comment from the previous one. There's no way I'm going to be able to do every one. Might repost it for a month straight, and maybe I'll eventually get to it. There's just a lot of suggestions, and it's just awesome to read all these. So I love reading them. Feel free to suggest more in the comments, and then the next episode I will hopefully talk about your stuff. But thanks for watching, guys. This was a lot of fun, and take it easy.